Welcome to the Unstoppable Recording Machine Podcast. And now your host, EYAL Levy.
Welcome to the URM Podcast. Thank you so much for being here. It's crazy to think that we are now on our 7th year. Don't ask me how that all just flew by, but it did. Man, time moves fast. And it's only because of you, the listeners. If you'd like us to stick around another 7 years, and there's a few simple things you can do that would really help us out. I would endlessly appreciate if you would, number 1, share our episodes with your friends. Number 2, post our episodes on your Facebook and Instagram and tag me at EYAL Levy URM Audio and at URM Academy, and of course, our guest. And number 3, leave us reviews and 5-star reviews wherever you can. We especially love iTunes reviews. Once again, thank you for all the years and years of loyalty. I just want you to know that we will never charge you for this podcast, and I will always work as hard as possible to improve the episodes in every single way. All we ask in return is a share, a post, and tag us. Oh, and one last thing. Do you have a question you would like me to answer on an episode? I don't mean for a guest. I mean for me. It can be about anything. Email it to me at eyal@urm.academy. That's EYAL@urm.academy. There's no .com on that. It's exactly the way I spelled it. And use the subject line, Answer Me EYAL. All right, let's get on with it. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the URM Podcast. My guest today is Chris Clancy, who's a musician, vocalist, producer, engineer, and mixer, who is known for being the vocalist of the U.S. metal band Mutiny Within, as well as now being an engineer under the legendary Colin Richardson. Anyone from the mid-2000s who was into the metal scene knows that Colin Richardson was basically, I still think is, the king of modern metal. He kind of defined modern metal as we know it. Bands like Trivium, Machine Head, Slipknot, As I Lay Dying, Fear Factory, Carcass. Those bands kind of defined the genre, and I personally have worked with him. He mixed my band, Doth, back in 2006, the album The Hinderers, and then also worked at my house, tracking the drums for Trivium's In Waves. And so I know personally that this dude has some super high standards for engineers. Wow. And for Chris to be working with Colin says everything about Chris. So when I found out that he was working for Colin, I was like thinking, hell yes. Someone from my cohort, basically, because his band Mutiny Within was signed to Roadrunner Records at the same time as my band was signed. You know, someone from our cohort has stayed in the game and moved up in the world. I love seeing that. I also want to mention that Colin Richardson just put out a tone pack with STL Tones, and Chris worked very closely with him on that. And we have a discount for listeners of this podcast. Basically, you just go to stltones.com, and this is for 10% off Tone Hub with the Colin and Chris pack. And the code is NTM Tone Hub 10. That's, I'll spell it, NTMTONEHUB 10. And it's valid from April 13th, 2022 till May 12th, 2022. And without further ado, I give you Chris Clancy. Chris Clancy, welcome to the URM Podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here.
It's been a long time.
I know we were just talking about this, but when I said it's been a long time earlier, I then realized we've never spoken, but it feels like we have.
Yeah, I think we chatted via Facebook Messenger when you started the URM Academy and did Nail the Mix. I seem to remember I submitted a mix in one of the first months, and you were like, that sounds really cool. I was like, oh, thanks. And then we had a little chat then. That's about the first time we chatted, I think.
Yeah, but I knew about you long before that.
Yeah, the same with you, because I think you were down in Florida, weren't you? And Tommy Jones and everything was there, and I guess Mark Lewis, was he still there?
Oh, no, he was there then. But then even before that, I knew who you were because of Roadrunner.
Yeah, I guess we were like label mates, weren't we? Back when in the glory days of Roadrunner before it all went down.
They kept comparing us to your band. I remember that.
Did he?
Yeah.
I'm sorry about that.
It's okay.
That's awful.
I forgive you. It was between you guys on one end and Sanctity on the other end, at which I get it because, you know, you have like real vocals. Not that we don't have real vocals, but you guys, you're a great singer. You're a great melodic vocalist, like a true
singy singer,
like a true singy singer. And we've never had any, and we're never going to have any. And if we do it again, we will not have any. And then Sanctity I think that they had like pitch screams, was still some melody in there. And for Roadrunner, that was a big thing. Like, they had to abandon death metal. So we kept getting you guys brought up to us in the most funny ways, just like, Mutiny Within's doing this, oh, Sanctity's doing that, or Mutiny Within's doing this, so check out what Mutiny Within's doing, oh, Sanctity did this. What about you guys? It's like, we're just going to be brutal.
Yeah, I love that. It's like, Mutiny Within have done this. It's like, yeah, but Mutiny Within haven't sold many records. It would have been a great comeback to that.
Oh, well, see, the thing is, that hadn't, history hadn't transpired yet.
No, not at the time. I think I actually met you guys. Did you switch vocalists?
We did.
Sean
Z, yep.
Sean Z, yeah. When I was down at, we were down at Sukov's and Sean was there. We spent quite a bit of time chatting down there. So I guess that's the other way I knew you guys.
Oh, so that must have been when we were auditioning him. I sent him down to Sukov's. I knew that Monty and co were going to scrutinize who we got very, very closely, and that it didn't matter what we thought. I mean, it did, of course, matter what we thought, but they were going to form their own opinion at the label, regardless of anything I had to say. So I figured, why not give this the best possible chance to be as drama-free and pain-free as possible? I'll send him to Sukov. Sukov is a great vocal producer. Let's let them hear what it would be like if it was done for real, as opposed to like my shitty productions in the basement. And it definitely helped a lot. I also wanted to see what it would be like with a real producer and not me. So that must have been when you met him. So that must have been late 2007, early 2008.
Yeah, I think it was 2008. 2007, like maybe Christmas time, 2007. Yeah, it's the winter of 2007. No, it's not really winter in Florida, is it?
Let's just say it's the only time of year that is not hell on earth.
Yeah, it gets a little warm.
So just for people who don't know, Chris's band was at Audiohammer at the time recording an album for Roadrunner. So that's where the link is.
Yeah, that was a lifetime ago.
I know, it really 2 lifetimes ago for me. Did you know then that you wanted to go into production? Were you watching Sukov and being like paying attention?
Yeah, to be honest, if I was Sukov, I would have hated me. Like, Sukov would leave the room and I'd be like looking at the sessions and seeing what he's doing. I'd be messing with the settings and trying to play about with it. And he caught me once and went ballistic at me. It's
like the people who want to get good are going to figure out a way to get good. Back in those days, there was no Nail the Mix, there was no URM, there was nothing. So if you had that opportunity to like look at what someone was doing and you really, really cared, kind of don't know anyone who wouldn't take that opportunity.
No, definitely.
Because there was literally nothing out there. There's no way to learn about this shit.
I was in the peak of I thought I knew what I was doing. Because, you know, when you start doing this sort of, you start getting to production, you have this, I forget there's a name for it, but you kind of have an overconfidence in what you're doing because you think you know everything. And then over a period of time, you realize how much you don't know and your confidence bombs. So I thought I knew everything. I was like, oh, it's going to be great. And I went in and, I got carried away playing with the sessions, and Sukov sat me down and went ballistic at me because I was messing with his stuff.
Oh, you didn't just look, you messed with it?
Oh, yeah, I was messing with it.
Oh, shit. Oh, dear. Oh, you had a comment there.
Yeah, I always had my own way I wanted to hear things, and I always have been really obsessive about it. I'm the sort of guy that'll sit in the back of a room if someone's mixing something. I'm like, oh god, it needs a bit more of this. You know, it just drives me crazy until I move it, or I'll let it go now. I've got better at that.
You basically jumped on the grenade for me because Doth went in like 4 or 5 months later, and I'm very much the same way, and I think he had already figured out how to deal with people like you and me, which was he did a save as. But I didn't do it stealthily. I was just like, dude, when you're asleep, I want to be able to open this. And I don't want to break anything, but I want to open this because like when I'm working on something, especially at that point in time, my entire life, every single fiber of my being was wrapped up in making that record amazing. You know, he had his own schedule, starting whatever time of day he wanted to start. Like, I wanted it to start super early, and we're at the studio. There's the shit. want to at least look at it and think about it. So he made a save as, and that's how we got around it. I think you probably jumped on the grenade for me, so thank you.
Yeah, definitely jumped on that grenade, but I learned my lesson there. Though it was good to be humbled sometimes, because you can you can get overconfident in things sometimes, and it's not a problem I have these days. But I think sort of when you're a bit more youthful, you can definitely feel you're an expert when you're not. But I definitely wanted to get into production though. I realised that maybe 3 or 4 years earlier, I went to do a course at a university in Wales, over in the UK, and the part of the course was doing audio, part of it was electronics, there were all sorts of things on it. And by the 3rd year, I just went out, bought Pro Tools and this Delta 1010 LT sound card.
Hell yeah.
I didn't bother attending university anymore because I didn't feel it was any use to me, and just sat at home every day obsessively. Like, remember BFD drums? I think it was BFD 1 or 2, and I'd print them out of time because I'd been at a studio and seen this guy grid the drums, and with beat detector, I was like, how do you do that? So I'd make MIDI drums out of time, print them until I figured out how to do it, and then I'd get faster at it. And then I think I had, is it Revalver, the PV amp sim that came out? Yeah, so I had that, so I obsessively tried to learn how to use that. So I was largely self-taught, really. So
nobody was telling you need to learn this stuff. You noticed somebody was fixing drums, but you didn't have, I'm just trying to understand. But you didn't have access to drummers, really, to practice on shitty tracks, or almost good enough tracks. But the point is, you didn't have raw drums to edit and get good at editing. So you would print fake drums out of time and then beat detect them. And hey, everybody listening who complains about not having tracks to practice on, yes, you do. Just do what Chris did. Yes, you do.
Yeah. If you've got the will to learn, you'll do anything. You'll figure it out. So yeah, I basically taught myself. I went to a studio in Wales with, do you remember Ginge and Jeff? Martin Ford.
Of course. They were at my house.
Yeah, so I used to work with Colin, and they were later managed by... Oh, they're with you. There you go. So, yeah, so you know them.
Yeah, so when they did In Waves at my house... Well, okay, so I met Ginge, and there were 3 dudes.
Was it Carl?
Well, yes, of course, Carl. Carl Bound for sure. That's not the one I was thinking of. It was Ginge. Maybe it was only Ginge and Carl. Anyways, I've stayed friends with Carl this whole time, had him on the podcast multiple times, and once actually, and on Nail the Mix. And he is one of the finest engineers I've ever encountered. And I remember, this relates to you, I remember when I met him and he was super young and he was working for Colin. This was on In Waves. I remember how self-guided he was about everything. Like, he would tell me that he would, take a 30-minute plane flight or something, and on that flight, he'd be editing drums. Like, every moment he possibly had, no matter what situation he was in, is on the subway, gonna edit drums. It doesn't matter. Like, he was always working on it. He lived and breathed it. And so it's interesting to me that he's gone on to a real good career, and he came up through working with Colin. And it's interesting hearing you having a similar sort of ethic about just do it, just get better at it, just do it. Get fucking better. It's on you to get better. It's interesting that you had the same sort of ethic about it. You both worked with Colin. Yeah,
I think it's definitely about getting better. I mean, for me, it's always, if you work long enough in this industry, then eventually you'll get presented with an opportunity, and you've got to be ready to take it on. For me, like the first job I did with Colin was a band called Kill the Lights. It's got Moose from Bullet and Jordan Still Remains, Travis, a lot of people. We went to Chapel Studios to record drums. I'd never recorded a drum kit in my life, but I actually used your course.
Which one?
Your drum course from Creative Live.
Oh, the old one? The one we did with Sean Reinert?
Monuments one.
The Monuments boot camp.
Yeah, the boot camp. Yeah, and it was like this extensive thing. So that was my knowledge on recording drums.
That drum section was actually pretty damn good. That's why URM based Ultimate Drum Production off of that with Matt Brown, because of the job he did on the Monuments boot camp. But so that's where you got your drum education from.
Yeah, exactly that, and doing quite a lot of touring and just a little bit here and there. But
hell yeah, awesome.
You can learn the knowledge, and then I applied it for the first time when I went in with Colin, and Colin said, "Oh, you're pretty good at this." And I was like, "Okay." I sort of half blagged it at the time. Told him after I didn't know what I was doing, but it worked. But I think you've just got to be prepared for it. So
I want to talk about that a little more, because not everyone is able to watch some videos and then go into a session with Colin Richardson and have him be like, "Oh, pretty good." Let's talk about watching the videos and what you mean by you got prepared. Like, were you taking notes? Like, did you have a checklist in your mind of things you're going to do? Like, you didn't just watch it the night before and be like, okay, cool, I know drum production. Let's go do this, Colin. Like, there had to be more to it than that, right? Or no?
Yeah, a bit. I mean, I think I've always been really big on visualizing things. Like, I recently took up sailing. So the first time I went sailing, I kind of got round and people thought I'd been out numerous times, but it was the first time I'd ever been out. But I just sat in my lounge kind of thinking about, I'd read up on the theory of it, watched a load of videos on it, and kind of gone over in my head. So I think if you prepare enough, you can go into a situation, it's like you've already done it before. So for me, I watched a load of videos on the tuning, seeing how all the different techniques work with, like, getting the resonant head like all tuned up nicely and stuff, and getting the top head. So I mean, the drum tuning is not that complicated. It's more to do with, I learned a lot about, like, if it doesn't sound good, how you can kind of, what you can look for in diagnosing the issues. I guess I've been lucky that I always have in my head, like, a sound that I'm after. So it enabled me to chase a sound I was after. So with a snare drum, there was a particular sound that I wanted to hear. And fortunately, it's the same sound that Colin wanted to hear. So I think this is why me and Colin go well together. We seem to have the same sound in mind when we set out.
Makes sense.
But it's just finding that it's having the tools to get you from what's in your head to making it a reality. It's I think, like, you could set up a guitar amp through a cab and have a selection of microphones, and as long as you know what you want to hear, if you sit there long enough, you'll get there. Apart from when you go tone blind after about 15 minutes, but
yeah, so you will eventually get there within 10 minutes.
Yeah.
And if you don't, you're not going to get there. So
take a break, come back to it. But, like, I've done all sorts of daft things. I was a huge fan of Colin and, like, Andy. And I remember buying Colin's Easy Drums expansion pack he did with Carl and Jason Bold. And I remember printing each individual drum the way that it had been processed by Carl and Colin, and the raw one, and just sitting there for days obsessing about, why does the kick drums, how's he done that? Is that tape saturation? Is it just EQ? Is it compressed? And I tried to, like, backwards engineer the finished mix, because it just comes up with a little black box, so you can't see what they've done. So I'd kind of undo that and work towards it to try and replicate it in my own way. So that's where I learned a lot of drum mixing from, because again, you don't have access to these tracks. So I try and backwards engineer stuff. And similarly now, I'm a big fan of Josh Wilbur, so I like trying to backwards engineer what he's done by watching everything I can find on him and just obsessing about it. So, I'll be driving down the motorway and thinking, how the hell does he get this amount of low end in his kick drum without it going crazy? And how does he get to sit with the bass? And then I'll just read something online he'll talk about, but right, and it's like a little piece of the puzzle. So I guess that's how I've learned the production for the most part.
About the visualization thing, I think that when people talk about visualize your future or whatever, it's kind of lame, because anytime that I've visualized 5 years from now, shit is just so wildly different. But the thing that does work for me is, I'll visualize an outcome I want. Like, I want to make a course with somebody, and, like, I will see it in its finished state. I will see the money it's made. I will see the people it's affected. I will see that person being stoked. I will see the impact, and then I will drop it from my mind and just let my subconscious basically set the stage. But then this other thing I've seen that I've done is musicians practicing without practicing. And the first place that I heard about this was the concertmaster for the Atlanta Symphony, and she was working on the Beethoven violin concerto, and it's a difficult fucking piece. She told me that the way that she knows that she's ready for the performance is she plays it in her head, start to finish, and if she makes a mistake in her head, she's not ready. So as soon as she can play it from start to finish in her head flawlessly, she's ready. She's ready to go. And one of my roommates at Berkeley turned out to be a complete fucking loser, but that's his fault. He rotted his brain with drugs.
Oh, right.
Not just any drugs. He
proper drugs.
Well, not even proper drugs. So in I don't know if you have this equivalent in the UK. Here we have this cough medicine called Robitussin. Sound familiar?
No, I've not heard of that.
Okay, Robitussin is still available, but back about 20 years ago, it had an ingredient in it that if you took too much Robitussin, like a whole bottle, you would have a psychedelic trip, like a legit psychedelic trip. There's no subtlety to it. It was like the real thing. And on par with like an LSD trip or something. It was just this detail that this little ingredient, I forget what it was called, but that was just left in there. So yeah, he kind of got addicted to that stuff. And I remember at one point in time, he had this wall, like, you know how sometimes college kids will put up like beer cans on the wall, like or beer bottles, they'll just make a shrine for like all their drinking. He had a Robitussin bottle shrine. It's so terrible. So yeah, he lost his mind. And I'm getting off point. What I was saying was he's one of the...
Did he ever have a cough, though?
No.
Well, there you go.
No,
so
maybe that's what it is.
That's a positive.
Maybe that's what it is. He had healthy breathing the whole time. Now, he's one of the most talented people I'd ever met in my entire life. Like, literally any situation he walked into, he could be in. Put him in a metal band, he'd do great. Have him go sub for a jazz band, he'd be great. Have him, like, go do a sight reading test, would do great. Like, everything. He would just do great. And this fucker never practiced. He just smoked weed, drank Robitussin, and played video games all the time. Like, I saw him pick up his instrument maybe twice, except for when he went to do those things. I asked him what he's doing. Like, what are you doing, dude? I don't get this. I don't understand how you're doing this. And he said, well, before I go to bed, I'll just lay in bed for like an hour and I'll just think about stuff I'm going to be working on the next day. And I'll imagine it in my head. Like, I'll play through all the parts. Like, I'll get the sheet music and I'll like read through it in my mind and I'll just learn all the parts. And that's all I need. Which, okay, that's an extreme case, but I think that everybody has some degree of that ability.
Yeah, I agree. I was always kind of lucky that, like, my sister started playing piano or keyboard when I was about 10, 11, and she'd come home and she'd been practicing with this keyboard, like, place she used to learn. We had a keyboard at home and I just sat there and I taught myself. So I ended up kind of catching her up without going to lessons. So I went to lessons, and then after about a year, it just clicked one day and I could sit down and the teacher would be like, right, you've got 2 weeks to learn this piece. And I'd be like, okay. And I'd just play it. And I was always that guy that I never had to try hard at anything. I'd just do it.
Mm-hmm. Motherfucker.
It was almost disappointing going through, like, you know, education. I'd learned piano and like then I got into a jazz band playing bass and started learning guitar, classical guitar, then learned guitar. And I did vocals, and I think it was like 18 months after starting vocals.
Can I just say, like, for people who aren't aware, Chris is a ridiculously phenomenal vocalist. Like, can sing Freddie Mercury lines.
Yeah, it's taking a lot of work.
Yeah, it might taking a lot of work, but still, like, you can legit do Queen covers. Just, it's actually kind of freakish. So you just learn stuff. You just are able to pick things up, and you attribute it to your ability to visualize things. To
an extent, yeah. I think if I'm interested in something, it's like my brain never switches off with it. You know, like if I got interested in maths next week, then I'd just obsess about it and I just learn and learn and learn and learn. So my mind's like a sponge if I'm interested, but if I'm not interested in something, I just can't pick anything up. But the visualization, that really comes in handy in a lot of scenarios. I guess if you know, everyone's done it as a mixer, I guess, you know, like for me, it bothers me if I go to bed and I can't figure out there's a problem with the snare drum. It's just not sitting right. It's not sounding the way I have it in my head. So I guess I get, you know, you can kind of a sonic print in my head of what I'm after and I'm trying to chase that. Sometimes it's not possible. The source material isn't good enough to reach that. And that's the point that drives me crazy. But, you know, it's the sort of thing I'll wake up at 2 a.m. in the morning and turn over and I'll just have this snare drum in my head and I'll be up for an hour in the middle of the night obsessing about it. And then I'll have a eureka moment. I'll be like, oh, wow. So I think it's just the amount of time I put thought into something that eventually leads me onto that eureka moment, and then you can kind of solve it. Do you know what I mean? Like in the way that Carl would sit there and obsess about it, it just absorbs you and it takes over your life. When I do a mix, it takes over my life, and I'm just swimming in it until it's finished, and I submit it, and I never listen to it again after that point, because there'll be something else I'll find with it that'll drive me nuts. It always happens.
I totally understand. So you know how I said that when I see an end outcome or end goal, I drop it. I'm not actually dropping it. What I'm dropping is thinking about the end. Then I am thinking about the process and what we're actually doing. And basically, I have to make myself stop thinking about it. And I do that so that like I can have a relationship with my girlfriend, so that, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So that like if I'm with my family or something, that like I can have a conversation with my mom. If I'm seeing a friend or something, that it's not me. And I legitimately do care about these people. I'm not a sociopath, but it's very, very hard to just stop the wheels from turning. It's literally all day, every day. Wake up thinking about it, go to bed thinking about it. And so even when I'm not like at the computer doing work or something like that, my mind is still hard at work on the issue. Like it doesn't stop.
It's problem solving, isn't it? You know, like for me, mixing is like a jigsaw. There's a perfect place to put every piece. And when you start, it's a mess. And then eventually the pieces start falling into line and everything works out. But yeah, it's hard to switch off. Like when I work at a studio doing a job, say it's a month long, I'll sleep for like 3 or 4 hours most nights, and I'll end up a complete mess because my mind just will not stop. But I think it's how I've got to where I've got as well. It's the obsessive mind for me, which is the key to everything. So when I was a kid, I was like 16, 17, and I discovered Roadrunner Records, and I was like, wow, all these bands. And I set my sights and saying I want to get signed to Road, and that was my aim in life.
Me too.
And I got laughed at.
Yeah, dude.
Yeah, you go.
Yeah.
You get laughed at by people because
awesome.
people say it's ridiculous, you know? You set your mind on something normal and everything.
Fuck them.
So
they don't know what they're talking about.
it took me to moving from my home to Wales, in another country. It's not that far away, but moving there, and I got scouted by Roadrunner in the UK with a band I had. That didn't work out. I think it was Mark Palmer, just wasn't into it. And then I left that, quit my job. Literally, this is quite a funny one actually. I was driving to work one day, and I'd been offered to go over to join Mutiny, that we called at the time. Try out from and everything.
In New Jersey.
Yeah, and I was driving to work one day, and I got to work, and I was like, I just had this compulsion to want to go. So I went around this like roundabout 3 times and looked at work, and I thought, fuck this. So I called up when I got in. I was like, right, I quit, booked a flight, went over, stayed in the basement for a couple of weeks, and that's where the Mutiny thing started. So the guy AJ had over-elaborated on everything, saying that, you know, they had this massive Roadrunner interest, and well, the actual truth was, Mike Gitter said, if you get an English singer, I'll forget it. He's not interested. He wanted an all-American band, so Mike hated me at the start, and then flew over, and the band surprised me, saying, we've got a show in 2 days with Paradise Lost in New York. I was like, what? You know, we'd just been writing a couple of songs, so we went over and did that. But I did the Roadrunner thing, and then after that...
Wait, we'll talk about the Roadrunner thing for a second.
Yeah, sure.
Just because I relate to it so much. So that was what I said too, was Roadrunner.
Yeah, that was it.
I don't care if it's death metal, Roadrunner. Like, and people were like, yeah, right, that's never going to happen. Like, you should be happy with Nuclear Blast. And you know what? Nothing against Nuclear Blast. Nuclear Blast is awesome. And I would have been happy with Nuclear Blast. But in the end, if that's what had happened, I'd be cool with that. But my goal back then was Roadrunner. And I did everything I could to figure out how to get signed to Roadrunner. I did a lot of research. I figured out who signs at Roadrunner. Who is it that person who signs answers to at Roadrunner? What is the process by which something even makes it to the circle of people of influence? Like, I figured all of this stuff and did everything I possibly could so that I could not only get in their circle, get Doth into their circle, but when we did end up in their circle, that we were doing all the things that the bands that they did sign did. And it took a lot of research and a lot of fucking work to, like, years and years of it, and it worked. But it was because I didn't allow for any other options, and I didn't let people who said it was crazy or unrealistic deter me. And it sounds like it was the same thing for you. That's what you wanted. You just quit your job and moved to another country. I love that. That's awesome.
Yeah, man. And even that was hard because I got detained at the airport once for like 5 hours by immigration because I didn't have a work visa to be there. I've been out of the country too many times, but I just blagged my way in and figured it out. So
that's great.
I'd put everything on the line. I'd sold a load of stuff. I didn't have a lot to go back to. I had no job. I had no money. And all my eggs were in one basket. And that's the way my life always works best. When I'm left with no other options and you just go for that. And I had the same thing after Roadrunner. And I owe a lot of the Roadrunner thing to AJ, the bassist, actually, because he'd done all the work that you had done. I'd figured it out on my end in my country, but over there he'd figured out, he got to know Mike Gitter and got to know Monty a little bit. He'd done all that. But I think people think that sometimes you just write the right songs and everything like that. You turn up and record label sign you. That's the way everyone sees it, but it's not. It's a whole business plan. It's a scheme.
A ring of and several rings of fire you have to jump through.
Exactly. It's that I think Jim Rohn said that it's if you want to be a millionaire, it's like you've got to turn yourself into the person that's going to become a millionaire. Something along that. He's got a way better quote than that. But it literally is. When I was 16, I wasn't signable by Roadrunner, so I turned myself into someone who was signable by Roadrunner. And similarly, after that, I came home and started doing some production, and I remember doing an online course with Brian Hood.
Probably from shit to gold.
Yeah, I remember that. I had that, learning from that. He did a business course online, and I did that and met some people. And he said, so everyone, what's the business plan? And my business plan was literally, I want to work with Colin Richardson. And everyone was like, all right, come on. Like, you can't just rely on that. And I'm like, nope, that's
Dude, those types of courses are not designed for people like you and me. And I'm saying that because URM put out a business course too. You can't, because people like you and me who are that specific, there's not that many. So like Nick Pilato, who works for URM, he's our production manager, the dude who films everything, like runs so much stuff. He's amazing. But before us, he worked for Andrew Wade in Florida. He was Andrew Wade's assistant engineer. His whole goal in life when he was like 16 was to work for Andrew. And he was from Pittsburgh and Andrew's in Orlando. So he went to Florida in order to be closer to Andrew, but he didn't know Andrew. He just went to Florida because it'll put him closer. This is when he was like 18. And he kept finding ways to end up at Andrew's studio. And at some point in time, Andrew posted that he needed help building a wall. Like he needed help just building stuff because the studio was under construction. Like, who can come help? And some kids came out to help. And that's how he got in. And he just stayed longer than the other people that were helping, and then just kept showing up over and over and over and over and over, which, is kind of unstable behavior. Like all this stuff that we're talking about. Like if I had a kid, I don't, but if I had a kid and my kid said, I'm betting everything on this one contact at Roadrunner Records. I'm going to get to Monty Connor, now at Nuclear Blast, but I'm going to get to Monty Connor. My whole future hinges on this one person saying yes, or like in your case, same sort of thing, or in Nick's case, I'm going to get this producer I've never met, who doesn't know who I am, I've never spoken to, in another city. I'm going to move there, and I'm going to get a job there, but he doesn't know he's going to hire me yet. He doesn't even know me. Like, honestly, it's irresponsible to tell people to do that, but it is what works. At least if you're that crazy, it works.
Yeah, these courses they're not designed for people like us.
But it is really good. Like, I know that in Brian's course and in the one we did, like, for people who aren't nuts and who do want to take it, there's a lot of room in this industry for people who aren't nuts. Like, you will still pick up a lot of really good things. But if you want to do stuff at the highest levels, or what you consider to be the highest levels, there has to be a level of, fuck it, this is what I'm going for.
I think it's got to be a realistic, fuck it, this is what I'm going for, though, as well, because,
like,
I think you could look at my situation and think, right, I decided I wanted to work with Colin, and then the opportunity came about, somehow, just because that was my main focus. But I think you can't discount the years of 7 or 8, 9 years of just obsessively getting back from work and just learning, practicing, and working towards something,
Oh, well, yeah, absolutely. I mean, you can't just you can't just say that you want it and then not basically point your whole life in that direction.
Yeah, you've got to turn yourself. It's all the hours. It's like, I do a lot of running, and it's like, that's all right turning up on the day and running some stupid distance, but it's all the hours and days and weeks, whatever, of running that's gone into there, where you get up at 6 a.m, go out in the freezing cold, in the rain or whatever. It's all of those things which add up to the point where you can turn up on the race day and do okay. So it's the same with this industry, I think, and the same with you and road running. You had all the years of becoming an amazing guitarist. That didn't just happen overnight. So it's a long game. And I think that's the hard thing that for a lot of people is keeping yourself on target for that long. It's a hard thing to do.
Yeah. But, same thing though with URM. It was also like all eggs in that basket, quitting production completely and trying that. But it was a long game leading up to it. But it was a calculated, fuck it, I'm doing this. I definitely hedged my bets and definitely worked really hard to set it up to where it could work. So sounds like you don't just take stupid risks, you take calculated risks that are backed by massive action.
Yeah, that's basically, yeah. I mean, I think if I said I wanted to work with Colin, but I'd never been in the industry and I didn't know anyone, it'd be ridiculous. But having been in the industry and knowing a few people, it was something that...
You could get to them.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. But it wasn't like a big manipulative thing. In the end, like, I was chatting to Colin on Facebook now and then and sending him mixes and stuff. And on Colin's end, he said he was really impressed with it. So he was like, okay, cool. So, he kind of helped me out with some mix notes, which was great. And I went to see Bullet Fire Valentine. I was friends with some of the band, so I turned up, we were backstage and stuff, had a load of beer. And then they did an announcement saying, they were like playing some stuff from The Poison, and said, Colin, the producer's here. And I was like, no way. Never met him. So I went over, sobered up in about 10 seconds and ended up chatting. I missed my train home. It cost me like £150 to get a taxi home afterwards.
Yeah.
But it was worth it because, I stood there, I got to meet Colin and Carl. We chatted for ages and everything. And then a couple of months later on, a little job came up that it wasn't really worth doing with Carl. It was only a little thing. And Colin says, do you want to do it together? I was like, cool. All right, let's do it. And then, it went from there, really. So that one chance meeting was chance. However, me being sort of prepared for an opportunity to come up, it kind of all just worked. If I hadn't put the work in for the past however many years and got good at my craft, then it would have been a complete wasted opportunity.
Yeah, and you don't know if one would come up again. I mean, it might,
exactly,
but it might not.
Precisely, yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I think that it's also important to know when those opportunities are in front of you. The reason I'm saying that is because I feel like those opportunities do present themselves for lots of people who point their lives in that direction, but lots of times people will turn them down for weird psychological reasons, or like they're scared, or
imposter syndrome.
Yeah, they feel like they're not, like stuff like that, which only if you're not ready at the end of the day, but you have to take those opportunities when they come to you and then figure it out.
Yeah, and it's also, everyone's got their own, like, their own level of sacrifice they're willing to make to do something. I remember when I used to tour with Mutiny Within and people would come up to me and say, I wish I could be a singer like you. And I was like, well, you can. I really didn't see why anyone can do it. It's just, they said, I want to do this, but then this came up and everything. I'm thinking, well, they're putting obstacles in the way as to why they can't do it. For me, I quit my job and went to a different country on a whim just to see if it would work. Like, it was a pretty big risk, and in the end, it was a pretty massive sacrifice I made. So doing that, a lot of people maybe wouldn't have done that and then say, I didn't make it because I didn't have the opportunity. But you did. It came at quite a risk, or it was an uncomfortable thing to do. So yeah, that's another thing.
The cost wasn't worth it at that time.
Yeah, exactly. And especially later on in life, when you end up settling down, you end up with a house and you've got, it's hard to make those brutal sacrifices and, fuck it, I'm just going to do this. Like, there's responsibility gets in the way,
It does, which is why I suggest that people try to get these things done early. Like, I suggest that, people spend their teen years, for instance, getting really good at something, because that's when you have the hours in the day. That is when you can spend 6, 8, 10, 12 hours a day and not get fired from your job or get divorced over it. And you have the energy too. So also then in your early 20s, that's when you can fuck up a few times and you can do crazy things like just move to another country on a whim because you have plenty of time to recover if it goes badly. You know, when you're 50, maybe not so much. The older you get, the less of a buffer you have for these types of decisions, and also the less time you have to really, really drop into getting really good at something. Like say you want to become a guitar virtuoso. You can do it at any age, for sure. You can do it. Just the reason that it happens younger for a lot of people is just because that's when they have the time.
Definitely. And I think the later in life, you get the collateral as well. You know, you've got more on the line with anything you do. I think that's a really big thing for me. I've noticed, you know, I've had opportunities coming up where, you know, I could join this band or this band and do the whole vocal thing and touring. I look at my life and like, I'd lose everything. I wouldn't have the pay to do this. I wouldn't have the money to do this. I'd have to get rid of my car or whatever. And I'm like, you know what? It's not worth it anymore for me doing that. So, I mean, I love the production anyway, so I'm going to stick with that. But yeah, it's some things are a little easier to do when you're younger. You've got less to lose.
Yeah, well, exactly. So you could still be doing the vocal thing, touring in a band. But the cost at this point, well, depending, you know, who knows? There's different levels of bands. But like at this point, you've determined that the cost is not worth it.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I joined a band last year. I can't mention the name. I don't want to drop them in it. But I joined a legacy band last year. And it was a band I listened to and I grew up and everything. I thought this is going to be killer. Just financially, we just couldn't figure out anything where I was just going to be able to live my life. And just, you know, I'd take such a drop. I was like, I just wouldn't be able to afford to live. So I had to walk away from it and, you know, stick with the production, which again, I think that's been a good move. But it's amazing the difference things make. You know, I keep saying like, you know, a little later on in life, you've got more overheads. There's, you know, I've got a daughter now, so any sort of touring, it comes at a cost with that as well. You know, you're away from family, you're away from you know your home, all sorts of things. It's a little harder to pull off.
It's harder to pull off, but these are good problems to have.
Definitely.
If like you are trying to balance a family with like a actual production career and then a legacy band wants you in there and you just can't do it or whatever, these are good problems to have.
It's kind of hard to admit that and think, you know what? But like, because I mean, with yourself, you know, would you want to get back on the road and get in a van and no? would you?
Fuck no.
No, no, I just couldn't do it anymore. Oh. No,
I was having this conversation yesterday, actually. Fuck no, absolutely not. For me to tour again, it would have to be worth it. And, you know, worth it is a vague thing to say, but it would have to be worth it.
Yeah, it would. It could be a number of things, but it'd have to be worth it, yeah. And not touring in a van, for God's sake.
Fuck no, absolutely not. No, it had to be worth it for the big picture. I don't just mean like for money. Though money matters, it would have to be worth it for the amount of time that goes into it before, the amount of time that it takes then, the impact on health, like the impact on everything else I'm working on, of course, money. Like there's so many things to consider. So it'd have to be worth it.
Definitely. Yeah, like it's no good doing something like that at the expense of the business you've spent years building up.
Fuck no. But when I was 23...
Oh, hell yeah.
Yeah.
I did love the touring days. I lived it up, you know, it was fun while it lasted, but I'm sort of glad I was quite bitter about it when it came to an end. I think I got a little entitled towards the end. I think you can do crazy things to your head.
That it can.
But I'm glad everything happened the way it did now, because coming out of it, I'm a better person now. I'm more balanced. That's all good. I think honestly, like, it would have just messed me up more and more as time goes on. You know, the more tours you do, I think we did like 8, 9 tours in a year. And the more tours you do, you've got to get through another show. So you have a bit to drink to get through the show. And then you have a bit more the next night. And it goes on and on and on. And, you know, every relationship you ever had just disappears. And it's just, it's brutal. But it was fun as well.
It is not a healthy lifestyle.
No.
At all.
No, it's not. Not at all.
Hey, everybody. If you're enjoying this podcast, then you should know that it's brought to you by URM Academy. URM Academy's mission is to create the next generation of audio professionals by giving them the inspiration and information to hone their craft and build a career doing what they love. You've probably heard me talk about Nail the Mix before, and if you're a member, you already know how amazing it is. At the beginning of the month, Nail the Mix members get the raw multi-tracks to a new song by artists like Lamb of God, Angels and Airwaves, Knock Loose, Opeth, Meshuggah, Bring Me the Horizon, Gojira, Asking Alexandria, Machine Head, and Papa Roach, among many, many others. Over 60 at this point. Then at the end of the month, the producer who mixed it comes on and does a live streaming walkthrough of exactly how they mix the song on the album and takes your questions live on air. And these are guys like TLA, Will Putney, Jens Bogren, Dan Lancaster, Tui Madsen, Andrew Wade, and many, many more. You'll also get access to MixLab, which is our collection of dozens of bite-sized mixing tutorials that cover all the basics, as well as Portfolio Builder, which is a library of pro-quality multi-tracks cleared for use in your portfolio, so your career will never again be held back by the quality of your source material. And for those of you who really want to step up their game, we have another membership tier called URM Enhance, which includes everything I already told you about and access to our massive library of fast tracks, which are deep, super detailed courses on intermediate and advanced topics like gain staging, mastering, low end, and so forth. It's over 500 hours of content, and man, let me tell you, this stuff is just insanely detailed. Enhanced members also get access to one-on-ones, which are basically office hour sessions with us, and Mix Rescue, which is where we open up one of your mixes and fix it up and talk you through exactly what we're doing at every step. So if any of that sounds interesting to you, if you're ready to level up your mixing skills in your audio career, head over to urm.academy to find out more. So once you met Colin, how did you get to the point where he was actually giving you a shot in real life?
I was in a band called Wearing Scars over in the UK I'd made. It was like a solo project which was turned into a band, and it was me and Andy James. He plays in Five Finger Death Punch now. So we were trying to get somewhere, and it wasn't really, no, we couldn't get picked up by a label. No one was really interested. So we're doing that, and we just wanted to make a second album. We had all the songs done, everything. I said, I just want to work with a really good producer for a change, rather than DIYing the whole lot. I just want to do it properly. So I approached Colin about the idea, and he was like, yeah, let's do it. So we did the drums with Carl. Colin was going to mix it. And I said, to Colin, we haven't got much of a budget. He's like, cool, we'll just mix it at your house. And I was like, what? This is Colin. Like, I've got this idea in my head that he's always fancy studios. He's like, no, we'll just do it in your house. I'm like, Colin, I work in my spare bedroom. He's like, it's fine. I was like, okay. And then, that fell through. This one project came up. We mixed it in my house, and it came out really well. Colin and Carl have been working together for a long time. Carl has sort of moved off in his own direction. I think Colin was kind of like playing around with the idea of retiring, and a job offer came up with Killer Lights. Moose gave me a call one day and says, he wants to do this record and everything. So I said, well, why don't we talk to Colin about it? And he was like, oh, that'd be amazing. It'd be like the old sort of Poison thing again. He always looks back fondly on that. And I talked to Colin about it, and we said, let's do it then. I guess maybe that was because the band had contacted me, probably with the idea that I'd contact Colin. But still, that kind of got me in there with Colin, and we just went and did it. And we had such a good time, and like I've said before, if we're after a guitar sound, we want to hear the same thing. It's very, very rare we want to hear different things. So our minds work the same way, and the way we did things worked the same way, and it just worked. So Colin was like, what, I think I'm going to stick doing this. I'm really enjoying just doing something slightly different. It was like not a new start as such, not that, I don't want this to sound negative on Carl at all. It's nothing like that. But Colin said he always wanted to work with a couple of rock bands. So we got a few jobs with rock bands from there, and it just led from one thing to another, really. And I don't know. We talk on the phone most days, really. We just get on, we're great friends. So I think that's really helped as well.
Oh, dude, I don't think it's negative on Carl at all. I think that the engineer, producer, assistant producer relationship is a temporary thing. Like it always is. If things go the right way, that person who starts as the assistant or assistant engineer is going to eventually go on to do their own thing. That's just how it goes.
Yeah, it's just the nature of it. When you're ambitious and stuff, you're going to want to fly your own flag at some point. You know, you are. Fortunately, a good thing with working with Colin is he tends to trust me with a lot of things, which I'm really glad about. So, we'll do some mixing projects where I'm doing most of the mixing and Colin's sort of, putting the input in as the overviews, which is massively helpful. Like if you took Colin out of the equation, it'd sound nothing like it. But it's nice that I'm getting to do most of the stuff. Sitting here doing a lot of mixing on my own with Colin's sort of advice and input and everything. And if, obviously it needs to get more hands-on, he will do. But I'm learning more through that process rather than sitting there watching Colin doing everything. So it's really beneficial for me and it works really well. But yeah, it's been, some days I wake up and I'm like, how the hell have I ended up in this situation? It's ridiculous.
It is, it's kind of nuts. I imagine that the feeling that you have, from time to time when you wake up here, like, holy shit, is a lot like in 2006 when Colin mixed the Doth record. He wasn't the dude who was supposed to mix it. Someone else was mixing it. There was a whole thing. And then Colin ended up mixing it. And I went to England to attend the mix. And I had this whole like, okay, I'm actually here and this is actually happening. This is fucking crazy. Because like we hadn't really done all the touring yet or anything like that. Like I hadn't really been in a big studio or anything yet. Like it was suddenly, whoa, I'm like go from my mom's basement and like doing all the work to like get signed for years and years and years. And then boom, I'm in London with Colin watching him mix this shit I've been working on in my mom's basement for years. This is fucking wild. But I remember, despite how surreal it was, that back in those days, people talked about how Colin takes a long time on things, which he does. But I always felt like that's people who aren't there don't understand exactly what that means. So the impression I took when I was watching him work, and then again on the In Waves drums when I watched him do that, is it's not that he takes a long time because he's fucking around or anything. He has this idea, this sound in his head, this ideal, and he knows what it is. He is not hunting in his head for a cool sound. He knows it's in there already. And so he's not going to stop until the thing coming out of the speakers is the thing that he's got in his head. And he's going to try everything possible until you're there. And there's just no moving on until you get to what he heard in his head, which is fine because that sound in his head is glorious. So I think that's why back in those days, Roadrunner was always cool to, extend the budgets, give them another month or whatever, because what you got back was just unbelievably good. But the thing that I think people didn't understand who weren't there was the dude is sitting there the entire time going for this thing, and this thing doesn't exist yet. He's trying to create it out of nothing. He just doesn't have that good enough switch in his head. Like, oh, that's good enough. Nope. There is no such thing as good enough. So it's a binary thing. It's either it is this sound or it's not this sound. And if it's not this sound, we're going to keep going until we get to this sound. Not there yet, keep going. And that can take a while.
It's achieving the sound at any cost. If the entire drum kit needed to be replaced, every single cymbal on the album gets triggered. If that's what it needs, then that's what gets done. And more often than not, that you don't need to do that, thank God. But if that needs to happen, it will happen. So I think the hardest thing you can get is if you mix a band and they send you a DI and it's just, sometimes you get those DIs that sound a bit sluggish. It's just not going to move the amp enough. You get one of them, and I have the same thing with Colin. I'm trying to achieve this sound, and you sort of know it's never going to get there. But, I can spend 2 weeks trying. So, it becomes an obsession. And yeah, that's why, I think that's why me and Colin get on so well, but it's also why he's done so well, because he won't give up until it reaches this point of it's not going to get any better. That's the sound he had in his head.
Yeah.
Because I think there's a sort of another thing as well. If you haven't got that clear vision, I always relate mixing to painting. Now, I can't paint for shit, but there's got to be a point where if I'm doing a portrait of something, it's peaked at a point. And if I get my brush put another blob of paint on and put it on the canvas, it gets worse. There's got to be. So it's finding that point where it's peaked and then putting the brush away and walking away. And I think that's as much of an art, is knowing when that moment's hit, as it is obsessing over something.
That's actually really tough, because I have seen great mixers and producers get to that point where something is at its peak tone-wise or whatever. Tone-wise or performance-wise or mix-wise, just they got there. It's amazing. It's as amazing as it's going to get, but they don't recognize it. So they might recognize it's cool, but they are still thinking, I could make it cooler. And they overshoot it, and sometimes they end up with something that's cool, but not as cool. Sometimes they just fly the plane straight into the mountain and have to start over. But I have seen this happen, and I'm saying this because I know it happens all the time to beginners and stuff who, not that they get to something great, but that they get to something all right and then ruin it because they didn't know that that's the best they could do. But I've seen it with great people, great mixers, great producers where they just overshoot the target, don't know when to stop. Knowing when to stop and having the discipline to stop and the confidence, really, the confidence to stop is huge. I think a big part of it is the confidence to say, this is it.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really good now that, especially I tend to work in the box a lot more now. So there's an advantage of session backups and saving things and archiving things. And even me and Colin are working on a band called Massive Wagons. We just finished tracking last month. So we're working on that at the moment. And I had an initial sort of draft mix and everything. It's like, cool, we'll start here and everything like that. And we got to mix like 3. And Colin was like, I listened to mix 1 last night and there was something really cool about it. And we just sterilized that. It sounded sonically better, but sterile. So it's like, you know what, we've gone too far, so you back it off. But having that sort of backup is really cool. Or even just, log in the mixes every so often, just bounce it, just have it there, because you can kind of chase that sound again. But it's kind of focusing on everything from, the engineering perspective of things sonically and annoying frequencies and everything, but also maintaining that liveliness and that attitude in there. And I think Colin's really good at that, especially with the attitude. Sometimes you can overdo things a little bit on the technical side and it just loses something. So there's so many things to bear in mind, but Colin seems to have this amazing wizard ability to just tell you what it needs and be right on the ball every time.
Yeah, it's kind of freakish. The thing that I'm wondering is, how do you process the idea of knowing when to back off? Like, do you sit there and doubt it, go over and over in your head?
For me, less is more. I'll try and get a mix to where it kind of wants to be in as little time as possible now, and then I'll walk away from it. And then I'll try not to listen to it until the next day, rather than trying to get it all done in one day. I used to sit there for 12 hours mixing, and then I think your ears just go. Something happens, your mind goes, your ears go, whatever, and it just gets worse. It's hard to answer that because I'll just, even if I'm mixing something for myself or something else, I just send it to Colin. An outside opinion is amazing.
Yep.
Of someone who can just give you that fresh approach. I'm very fortunate in that I've got Colin there to say, yeah, this is cool. I'd just do a bit of this, bit of that. And he's like, okay, cool. So that gives me a confidence to know I'm on the right track. Similarly, I'll send it to Colin sometimes and be like, this is a mess, because I've spent 14 hours on it in a day and my ears have gone and it's screaming treble and like everything's just gone a bit loopy. That does happen as well. But knowing when to walk away, I think everyone's still learning it. I think sometimes you overshoot and then it's having that ability to admit that you've gone too far and go back, Just being honest with yourself.
I don't think that this is something that you can aim to be perfect with, but it's something that people should keep in mind. Because at the same time, you don't want to become one of those good enough people either, right? You do need to keep striving for excellence and to do better and to find new things and to keep expanding. Like you got to keep doing that. So to know with confidence that you have done that, but then also that you haven't taken it too far and like destroyed it.
Yeah.
That's Goldilocks zone.
And I think
it's tough.
Yeah, and I think it's also comes with experience. I guess it's approaching things. Like I learned a lot of this from Sneap, really. Like Andy will just sit there and listen to a mix like a couple of times, but not touch anything. And he'll be like, and you'll think about, is this a problem? What can I do with this? What can I do with that? And he'll just sit back and just, rub his beard and have a good mull over of it, where I'm a bit overeager sometimes. So I'll be like, I'll get 20 seconds into a song. I'm like, oh, that guitar could do with a bit more, 8K on the top. So I'll go in and do it. And Andy's more of the, no, sit there and strategize. Don't just grab things and start moving them. And I think that's something that a lot of people do. And I think everyone's guilty of it. And learning that's a really good thing. So I try more now to get it to a decent place by just faffing about and then listening to it and finding, right, what's the biggest problem I've got right now? And I'll be like, right, well, the snare sounds like shit. So maybe I've used the wrong sample. Something's gone wrong. Sometimes I've been off the whole snare chain, everything start again. But I'll get the snare where I want it to be and I'll be like, okay, that's cool. But from that point, that's going to interact with something else in the mix. So you get the snare right, and maybe, the kick doesn't really sit well with the snare now. Maybe the frequencies are in the same place. Maybe the click of the kick and the top of the snare are in the same. So you might want to move one of them. You might want to make the kick sharper, or, push it above and below. So I'll then move the kick. But inevitably, it'll lead you onto another problem. But it's kind of doing it in sequence until you get to a point where you don't really hear the problems anymore and then calling it quit. I guess that's probably a better way of
that makes
putting
sense.
it. Yeah, that's probably a better answer to it. But at that point, though, I'll send it to Colin, and Colin will find a problem with something, saying, "Oh, the snare could do with more ring on it." So I'm like, right, so I'm back to the snare. And that leads to a problem because the kick doesn't work as well. And it just it doesn't just happen like, you sit there and it's like you start and then 4 hours later on you're at a point and another 4 hours you're at a point. It kind of, everything ends up like 70% done within like 4 or 5 hours of starting a mix. And it might take another week, jump in between songs. Maybe you mix another song on the album and kind of discover something like, oh, you know what, if we get the guitars and do this, it sounds killer. Will that work in another song? And you learn a little bit from each song and pour it onto another song, and it slowly just levels up an extra 2% here and then a 2% there and everything until it's reached its peak. And at that point, it's done, or you run out of time, and it's it's as done as it's going to be, I guess. But yeah, that's probably a better way of approaching the of describing the process that goes on in the head. But there is a point when you can still get to that point where you've got maybe 95% of maybe you feel the potential is there, and you start obsessing about something which doesn't really matter, and then you kind of do that, and it causes more problems than it's fixing. So I guess that's a good point to walk away, but
Yeah, that is the point.
Yeah.
To walk away from. I guess where you're no longer making it better, you're just making it different or worse.
Yeah, and you have that inevitable problem where everything's got louder and you've run out of headroom again and everything has to get pulled back.
Yeah.
Yeah, it always happens.
How long does it take you guys to generally complete an album mix these days?
About 3 weeks.
Okay.
But honestly, it depends because, we did the Kill the Lights album, the first one. We spent, I can't remember, I don't want to over-exaggerate. It was between 12 and 18 days on the first song. Mm-hmm. Because we'd never worked together before. I was super obsessive. Colin was super obsessive. And there's times where I'll rein Colin in and say, we're going mad here. And then there's other times he'll rein me in and say, you're going mad here. So it took a bit of time to figure that dynamic, but it took 18 days to mix it, but it came out well. So there's other instances with, we'll get a mix and it'll be pretty much done within a day. Other times it'd be 3 days. It depends. But again, with the album mix, like we did Machine Head in January, and we only had like 2.5 weeks to mix it between schedules. It was like a last minute thing that came in. With that, we were really up against it, so it just had to be done. We had to get from the starting point to this sounds great in no time at all. We kind of, to an extent, got lucky. Rob always gives us amazing, and Zach gives us like amazing recordings anyway, but it just sort of worked, and then it improved from that point. But obviously, you always got the pressure on as a mixer where we could have had like 5 failed attempts to mix a song, and then we would have run out of time. It just worked,
Yeah. With a winning team, you can take those kinds of risks.
Yeah.
More often. Like, we are going to do this in a shorter amount of time than we're used to, but we have a high degree of confidence we'll be able to do the job. And it's usually true.
Yeah, it is. You just make it work. If you've got 5 weeks to mix the song, you'll spend 5 weeks doing it.
It's true.
If you've got 2 weeks, then you're just going to make it work. You're going to do it. As long as you know when you start how long you've got, you can budget the time and make it work. Definitely.
It's weird. It's really weird how the amount of work always stretches to the amount of time you have.
Yeah, definitely. Or in Colin's case, plus a week.
Plus a week, yeah.
Yeah.
But for good reasons. You know, another thing he taught me was he was the first person I ever met that actually had a set schedule and like took weekends.
Yeah. We don't do that anymore.
You know, he doesn't take weekends anymore?
Not anymore, no.
Wow. All right.
Yeah, times have changed, budgets have changed. So, you know, we try and take, like, if we've got like a 5-week recording schedule, we'll take like 4 days off in the middle. Or we'll finish all the drums and the pre-pro and everything, you know, really like full on laborious stuff where we're really focused, and then we'll take a break. So we try and take breaks.
That makes sense. Is it still a set work schedule?
Yeah, to an extent, but that's kind of, to be honest, it's mainly because it's real life in 2022. You know, it's bands have got jobs, so you've got to have a fairly set schedule because you've maybe got the guitarist for 5 days and he's back at work. So you've got to make sure that everything ties up with the schedule in that time frame. So I tend to sit down with the band and we have Google Sheets and we plan out, right, we're going to take 7 days for pre-pro. That's going to be between these dates. Then we're going to take 2 days off. That's when we edit everything. And then we're going to crack on with guitars and bass. And, you know, I plan it out on a really strict schedule. And generally it works out fairly well. I mean, it holds me and Colin to it as much as anyone else.
I think that bands really do appreciate that.
Yeah, I mean, I've been on the other side of it, you know.
Yep, as have I.
Yeah, and you know, you're in a band, and especially if you got a job or something like that, and you're trying to allocate time for recording, and someone says, right, well, we need you at the studio for 5 weeks, and you sat there on the couch for 3 weeks doing nothing, when you could be at home earning a bit of money or doing something useful.
Oh, yeah.
You know, it's like being in the studio, it's like everyone thinks it's this big rock and roll thing. It's a lot of waiting around.
Yeah, no naming names. I learned that you have to give artists a strict schedule for their sake as much as for yours, because I have, like you, I have been on the other end of that where it's just like, wow, I just put off months of my life to come here and stay here, and like we could be working now, but we're not. I've just been on the couch so many hours. Like, what are we doing? Like, what the fuck are we doing? No schedule, no nothing, no knowledge of when we're going to do what. That kind of stuff makes artists nuts. And so even though artists do want to have kind of an artist life to a degree, they want the people that they hire to produce to be in charge of things like a schedule. They want to know that the people who are producing the record, they have things under control.
Yeah.
And are taking things seriously and are responsible adults. So, yeah, giving a schedule that's super, super regimented and lays out how everything's going to get done in the allotted time is super important. Bands really appreciate that shit, in my experience. No,
they really do. And another thing as well, you know, like I set out a schedule for, again, the Massive Wagons we just did. And I hadn't checked the schedule in a while because I was just engrossed in the recording process. And me and Colin were like, yeah, well, we'll do the guitars till Sunday and then we'll do this and everything. Because we kind of run out of schedule. We just had a few extra days. Mm-hmm. And the guitarist suddenly turned around and said, oh, well, I'm off home tomorrow night and I've got work for the next month. And he's off home the night after. And we were like, what? So we just had to jump straight in and just, I've never done so many leads and solos in like a day and a half in my life, but we got it done. That's the whole purpose of it. But if it had gone wrong, it would have been our fault because, well, my fault. I'd set the schedule and I hadn't checked it. So yeah, it's important to check the schedule you set as much as anything else. Yeah.
I feel like things like that are, for a lot of music people, are kind of something that they have to learn how to do. Lots of people from the real world are probably wondering, like, what's so hard about that? But for a lot of music people, it's something that you have to learn how to do because you're not wired with it.
No.
And a lot of the music industry doesn't operate or didn't operate like that. So it's something that has to be imposed upon and a habit that has to be built. Basically.
Yeah, it does. And that's something I'm still working on to this day. I've tried scheduling things more and more, but I just get engrossed in tasks and suddenly I've got to do this by the end of the day. Maybe I've got some session vocals and I've got to mix this and this. I get so into the mix. Suddenly it's 9 p.m. at night. there's no way I'm going to get the session vocals done now. It's just too late to start. You know, I screw up with stuff like that all the time, or I'll get back to that email in a minute. I'm just doing this, and it's a really important email. When I read it later on, I should have got back to it at the time. But I definitely need to work on that. But I have done it in the past, and it's really helped me. It's just... my life is organized chaos. That's kind of the way I live, and it sort of half works, you know.
It's one of those things where I think you have to do your best, but at the same time, knowing that a lot of the great results come from the over obsession and the hyper obsession, you can't totally commit to a schedule like it's written in stone. That's how I am now. So I schedule everything, and I kind of look at my calendar pretty religiously. But that doesn't mean that I stick to it religiously, because, like, if something comes up on a day where I have a bunch of stuff scheduled, but that thing is more important, or it's only going to happen then, you know, or something takes longer than you thought it would, takes several hours longer, you have to be willing to be flexible. So when you're working with has a schedule change, like all kinds of things, you have to be willing to be flexible. But I find that at least setting the schedule and sticking to it within reason makes a huge difference. Like, just putting it in the calendar and getting the notifications makes a huge difference for me.
Yeah, I've never been more productive. It was, again, Brian Hood with, you know, Live Your Life by a Calendar, and I did it for about a year. I've never been more productive, and, like, I slept better because I wasn't thinking, oh, crap, I've not done this, I've not done that. It was just on the calendar. And if I didn't get something done, I just moved it to another day. So, yeah, I should definitely do that again. But
yeah, it really works.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, I'm going to take this away.
It really works. So tell me about the plugin.
Yeah, we did the STL Tone Hub pack.
Which is cool. I was not expecting to see that.
No, I mean, it's been something when I started working with Colin, I was like, have you ever considered doing like, because at the time it was a Kemper pack, you know, and we talked to STL at the time, and Colin was he was into it, but we had other things going on. It was, you know, we'll do it later on. And I think it's sometimes a bit hard for some of the I guess, you know, the more, Colin won't mind me saying this, but like more old school guys to kind of feel like they're giving away the secrets in a way.
Yeah.
So by giving away the tones, you know what I mean? But ultimately, I wish if I wasn't working with Colin, he'd come out with a pack earlier, because I would have loved it, you know, and I figured it was worth doing. So we had a chat about it, and we got talking to STR and everything, and we liked everything they said, and they took it really seriously as well. You know, we did the pack, we sent them the tones, and we had a bit of sort of to and fro on things, and they were obsessive as obsessive as us with getting it as accurate as it is. So yeah, you know, it was a really good experience. And I think it's come out really well as well. You know, I've seen, jump into something else, I think you can think you've done something which is really cool, but it's not up to you to decide that. You know, you could write an album and put it out and the world thinks it's shit. You just don't, but in your head, it's amazing. So we did it and we were really proud of it. And I'm like, you know, we'll see what people think of it. Because there's a lot of pressure. It's, you know, Colin's name's on the thing, you know what I mean? It's like, you know, people are expecting a lot. And you see, you know, guys on YouTube doing playthroughs with the tones. And I'm like, oh, fuck, that sounds amazing.
Yeah.
So I'm really happy with it. And, you know, I use it myself, which is great, because a lot of the tone packs, plugins by anyone, they're great, but I have something specific that I would want, and I'm trying to create something I want out of something that's not meant to create that sound. You know what I mean? It's a different IR, it's a different cab, different microphones, whatever. I've got the chance to create something with Colin that is what I was after creating. So it's been a huge time saver for me doing mixing work. So that's been great. And
it does sound great. And I think that what a lot of these tone packs that great producers and mixers put out are exactly that. People trying to find solutions for a problem that basically they can't find the solution for in this format anywhere else. So like, if they were going to use this format, what would they want? Here you go. This is it.
Exactly. And we tried to do it like true to Colin's workflow as well. Like, you know, we're not in the tape days now, so you don't have to EQ the piss out of something as you're recording it. So almost all of the tones, apart from like signature ones that are in, you know, like, you know, trying to recreate some of his, you know, big album tones, all of them have no EQ on. It's just 1, 2, 3, or 4 mics blended flat. And we kept it like that. So I know a few people said, oh, why would you keep it raw? Why would you not EQ it? Well, we want a raw tone when we're mixing, because then you can EQ it into something. If it's already EQ'd into something, it's not going to EQ into my mix because it's EQ'd for something else. you're EQing it without any context. So we created raw tones that I think they sound great on their own, but they've got the flexibility to be kind of EQ'd into a context, which I think sometimes people can put out tones and things which they're only going to work in one context, and it's not going to be the context that I'm going to have.
Context is everything when mixing.
Yeah, precisely.
Yeah, when people release mix-ready tones, what mix are we talking about? The mix that they made those tones on is what those tones are ready for. Now, I think that stuff that sounds very finished is really cool for writing demos.
Yep.
For those types of things, it's really, it's great to not have demos sound like shit. Is really, really awesome. But for real mixes, you need to have the flexibility to mold things to the context that you're working in. So it makes perfect sense.
Yeah, if you take one producer's guitar tones and another producer's like drum tones and another producer's bass tones and everything and put them all together, it's probably not going to work. Similarly, you've done this from a mix standpoint. I'm sure someone says, oh, we love the bass sound on this Tool album, and we love the guitar tone from this Pantera record, and we like the vocals from this jazz record or whatever, and you think, that's great, but it's not gonna fit together. It just doesn't work like that. So yeah, that was the whole point of having the raw tones on there, and obviously the album tones are on there. You'd have to kind of probably replicate some of the drum tones and everything on there to make it work, unless you get lucky. But at least they're there. People can try it out.
Yeah, awesome. I think it sounds great. I was super surprised, honestly, that it happened, but was very, very stoked that it happened, and also stoked that we were able to do this. It's been a pleasure having you on, man. We should do this more often.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll have another catch up in a few years or something. Yeah. No, it's been nice talking to you. You've always been a name that I've known of, and I think we've chatted a few times on Messenger and things like that. But it's nice to have a chat with someone after all this time,
Likewise, man. Likewise, and congrats on everything. It's awesome to see someone that I've known about for this long doing well and still in the game.
Thank you. Yeah, it's not easy to stay in, but the same to you as well. I mean, what you've created with the URM Academy is incredible.
Thanks. From
the start of it to what you do, and I know you work relentlessly on it as well. You're not just sitting back and letting it do itself. You work tirelessly on it, and I really admire that. It's nice to see.
Well, thank you. Well, awesome, man. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you. You too. Look after yourself.
All right, then. Another URM podcast episode in the bag. Please remember to share our episodes with your friends, as well as post them to your Facebook and Instagram or any social media you use. Please tag me at EYAL Levy URM Audio at URM Academy, and of course, tag our guests as well. I mean, they really do appreciate it. In addition, do you have any questions for me about anything? Email them to me at eyal@urm.academy. That's EYAL @urm.academy, and use the subject line, Answer Me EYAL. All right, then. Till next time, happy mixing.
You've been listening to the Unstoppable Recording Machine podcast. To ask us questions, make suggestions, and interact, visit urm.academy and press the podcast link today.